Hi, Dave Champion here. In the pro-gun community, there's an expression that goes something like this. If you say, I believe in the right to keep and bear arms, but you don't really believe in the right to keep and bear arms. Well, likewise, I would apply it to other rights as well. For instance, if you say, I believe in the right to protest, but guess what? You don't really believe in the right to protest, which is what I want to talk about today. Throughout 2016, we have had a lot of protests. We can name the more significant ones, the Black Lives Matter protests and the recent protests against Donald Trump getting into office. And as I look at those on the right, it seems they have little use for protest, and they would like to see that right suppressed. When I was a boy, I used to see the KKK marching, watch them on television. Of course, where were they marching? In the street. We'll get to that in a minute. But my mom used to see me looking at this, and she would, and by the way, my mom was so hard right, she probably made Ronald Reagan look like a communist. And she would explain to me that in America, even though most people very likely disagreed with the KKK and found their message reprehensible, they had absolutely every right to be out there doing their thing and protesting and holding signs and yelling out their slogans, that was a valued part of America. And because of that and other reasons, I was very comfortable as I grew up in this, most of my life, identifying as the right. But the right has lost their moral compass over the last several years, and they no longer value this package of rights. They only value the rights that are important to them, which is why I can no longer identify as being on the right. We have to understand that the right actually has little use for protesting. The right doesn't protest, with one exception. They protest against abortion, which is normally a couple dozen old ladies holding signs, or the Westboro Baptist Church. Aside from that subject, the right never protests. So they see no value in protest, despite the long and distinguished history of protest in our country and the fact that it has been stated again and again by the Supreme Court as one of our fundamental rights of freedom of expression. Yet, today, the right sees very little value in protest. So let's look at a few of the reasons that the right says protest should be shut down. Number one, I don't like it when they block the sidewalks. Protests virtually always block the sidewalk and always have. And out of the seminal case in the United States comes out of the Second Circuit, written interestingly by Sonia Sotomayor before she was elevated to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it says that state laws that prohibit things like blocking the sidewalk or impeding traffic on the roadways, those laws are unenforceable against the right of protest. What's one of the other ones? Blocking traffic. They can't block traffic. Sorry, they can. And always have. Because where are you going to put 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 40,000, 60,000 people? They're going to block the road and they're going to block the sidewalk. They always have and they always will. And the federal courts have said that's fine as long as it's a temporary condition. Another rationale, if I can call it that I hear from the right as to why protests should be shut down is because emergency services vehicles can't get through. Well, almost all of these protests take place in an urban environment, virtually 99.99999% of them, where there's always an alternative way for emergency services to get to where they need to get to. Also, this isn't a case of protest. Emergency services have trouble getting to where they need to get whenever you put, say, 30,000 people in one place. But yet I don't hear any calls to have anything else other than protest stop. I don't hear any calls to say, well, look, you've got 50,000 people at this festival, cut it off because somebody may not be able to get medical care. No. But they do that with protest. Why? Because they want to suppress protest. So where do most people on the right want protests to take place if not in the streets? Here I am, out in the perfect location as far as the right is concerned to have a protest. I'm not in a parking lot. I'm not interrupting people trying to park. I'm not in a street. I'm not inhibiting ambulances or any other emergency services vehicle. And I'm in a place where it doesn't matter what my message is because no one can hear it, which is exactly what the right's agenda is in suppressing the right of protest. That's exactly where they want the protest to take place. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with somebody who's on the right and who would like to see protests suppressed. Although he wouldn't characterize it that way, that's exactly what he wants. He was saying that they should not be able to block sidewalks, they should not be able to block the streets. I corrected him and told him that that's not what the courts have said. And he says, well, I'm disappointed to hear that because that's what I believe. I believe they shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I said, okay, so where would you put 8,000, 20,000, 30,000 people if not on the street? And he said, a park. I said, you mean some place where they don't bother anybody and nobody hears their message? And he looked at me kind of sheepishly and he said, well, I don't want to hear it. And that, my friends, is exactly what the right is communicating by their desire to oppress the right of protest. Now, recently, with the ones after Trump won the election, all sorts of false claims were made. I'm reading all over social media about the riots, okay? Let's go back to Protest 101 and Riot 101. This is a protest. Whether you like it or not, this is a protest. You don't have to approve of it. This is a riot. Now, nobody likes riots. However, the right wants to merge the two. For instance, every case where there was even this much of a disturbance, the right immediately calls it a riot. For instance, the anti-Trump riots in Los Angeles, somebody spray painted on the LA Times building. Riot! In Louisiana, down in New Orleans, somebody spray painted on a famous statue during the protest. A riot! Okay. In Portland, somebody took a baseball bat and cracked the bottom left-hand part of a woman's windshield when she got stuck in the protest. Riot! No, they remain protests. If you have 10,000 people protesting and 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people commit a criminal act, it doesn't make it a riot. If that were the case, all you'd need is a couple agent provocateurs and every single protest could be shut down. The goal is for the police to arrest the people who have committed the criminal acts. Let us say you have 10,000 people protesting and 2 commit a criminal act. So you've got 2 criminals, you've got 9,998 lawful citizens exercising the right of protest. But the right would have you believe they all need to be herded, arrested, shut down, sent home, forced because of the actions of 2 people. Of course, that's not rational, but it's what the right wants to say because they want to suppress the right of protest because they have no use for it. So let me conclude with this statement. We all value, I would hope, constitutional rights, although the right does not seem to value the constitutional right of protest because it's meaningless to them. They don't plan to use it. So let me share an alternative point of view with you. Anti-gunners, the left, they have no use for guns because they don't intend to use them. So, pro-gun people, which typically is on the right, are you okay with them attempting to suppress your right to keep and bear arms? The same as you're now trying to suppress their right to protest because they're not going to use your right and you're not going to use their right. We should suppress them both, perhaps. No? Well, here's an alternative thought. Perhaps we allow the right to keep and bear arms to flourish as well as the right to protest. I'm Dave Champion. Thanks for being with me. Take care. Bye-bye.